G'day and welcome to the panel, our weekly Supercoach show, the official Supercoach show for NBL 25. Round one is in the books. It was a great time over at Hoops Fest. Maybe a little bit of a stressful time for Supercoach owners going into the first round of the season. So it's in the books. We can sit back, we can relax, we can assess, and we can get moving on some trades. Joel Peterson with you. Great to have your company again here on the panel. James Clements is here. G'day, James.
Hello, JP. I like that you're saying we can relax now because this is only the most stressful week, right? We're going to try to nail round two. Off we go. But I'm like Moo Deng. You know, that awesome baby hippo? Like, NBL starts again. I'm just like, the entire time, loving every second of it.
Just being showered in stats in the little tub in there. And Boydie from the Basketball Blokes is here. Boydie, how did you find round one?
Well, it's good to have the real stuff on, I think. We talked about the Blitz at length, I know, last week and in our personal pod as well. So it was good to have the real stuff, and I'm glad I'm not a one and done last week after episode one.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you back. There was no doubt about that. Let's get into our teams from last week. Of course, round one over at Hoops Fest. It all kicked off on Thursday night, Melbourne United and Tassie. We talked last week around captains and that kind of thing coming into round one. James, how did you fare?
Yeah, not great, JP. I'll tell you that much. Look, I'm just angry in general. That's, like the Hulk. I'm always angry. That's why the green is here, right? That's how it rolls. Froling instead of Days. Like, Xavier Cooks is my last man out. Every decision I made, it felt like it slightly backfired, apart from Derek Walton Jr., I'm just saying. So I ended up on 220, and I felt that was well below par. I was aiming probably for that 250 around there. That felt like when you've got the unlimited sort of resources at your disposal for round one, it's literally just nailing your picks. And Froling being the centre, he just sort of under-delivered. You still had Olbrich on the bench. Very handy stuff, but 220... not as much as I liked, especially watching Days go off. I'm like, this is just like, look, I've got a 5-year-old. Like, this is the dude who just turns around and whang. Like, that's what that felt right? I'm just like, come on, Darius, you're killing me. Like, that is awesome. It's exactly what I expected. So you make that call in your brain, but not on Supercoach.
Who did you settle with as far as a captain went?
So I think with Derek Walton, no, it might have been Froling in the end. So it was basically between Derek Walton Jr. and Froling. That's another mistake there. It's one of those ones where you look at it and go, Olbrich, and we'll talk about this obviously later, but Olbrich and Froling and Days in that same front court, there's obviously a lot of points to be garnered. You're just sort of hoping that when the roulette wheel spins that you land on the right spot.
It is round one. Only round one, so there's plenty of time to go. Boydie, how did you fare?
Pretty good in the end, 253. I guess only bad decision was a start sit, which I started Jack White over Hurt from Southeast Melbourne, who ended up with, I think, double White's score. So I made a little bit of an error there. Captain choice was good. I picked Darius Days, thanks to Banksy's captains. With us, I think, he had a 43. So it was the best of the new import price players at 270k odd, 277. So it worked out good.
Nicely done. 241 for me in the end. Bryce Cotton as captain, death, taxes, and Bryce Cotton against Southeast Melbourne. They're sort of the three certainties in life. We talked about Windler this time last week, which was a little bit of a gamble, and we talked about that his minutes may not be there, and it wasn't a terrible score, but he's probably the one that might have been a little bit disappointing from my perspective, and then I had the same thing, so I started Jack White over both Henschel and Olbrich. So didn't completely kill me, but just that little start-sit rotation with Jack White in that Melbourne team, and we'll talk about Melbourne in terms of their point scoring, but 241, pretty happy
with that.
And we're in a position where we can start to make some moves coming into round two. Let's set up our hot or not. So the top 5 performers from Supercoach, and of course all this data available through supercoach.nbl.com.au. You can get all the top performers, projections, and all kinds of things with the data that comes with your Supercoach team. So Jalen Adams had 54 points against Adelaide on Sunday. He absolutely lit it up, especially in that first quarter. He looked like he was destined for really good things. Parker Jackson Cartwright picked up where he left off last year with 49. Darius Days, we've spoken about, had 43. Bryce Cotton at 448, one of the more expensive players in the competition, had 42. He would have been a captain for many, including myself. And Milton Doyle had 41 to round out our top 5. Boydie, Jalen Adams, no preseason, rolls in with 54 in the opening game of the round. Not a bad effort.
It was pretty good. Good to see Jalen of old. I guess last year he kind of got stuck around those 30-point scores a lot of the year. So it was good to see him really smash it out and have a ceiling score to start off the year. 392k, obviously, so he wasn't as expensive as your PJC and your Cotton, so it was, could mean you could do some other things with your team as well. So I think it worked out quite nicely. Gorge is saying all the right things. He's the man. Whenever I need him, I'm putting the ball in his hands. So, I mean, he's an option for week 2 as well with Sydney on the double. So couldn't go wrong with him, I don't think.
Former MVP, we know the quality that he can deliver. JC, what about Milton Doyle? In the top 5, he's probably the surprise one.
He probably is. Like, you look at that 41, and you especially watching that game, he started super slowly, wasn't hitting anything, and then came on like a freight train. You're like, oh, that's interesting. And like you watch, I think when we watch Tassie and we watch Melbourne United this year, like I think both teams will have these sorts of guys, right? Where especially it's a tough matchup for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
They played in a grand final last year, of course. And Milton Doyle being the one to go off, where you've got Shea Lee, you've also got Daly going off as well. It feels like both of those teams will probably have one guy each week that just goes absolutely hammer and tongs, and then everybody else is kind of like, ooh, we're doing okay. But there's like, so I feel like their ceiling as a team is massive. Player by player, it's a bit weird. So you look at Milton Doyle and go, that was awesome. And if you actually had him rostered, like, more power to you. That's incredible. But seriously, the Darius Days thing's still just right at me. Like, it's just death by 1,000 cuts watching him play, getting 1 million boards. I'm like, come on, man. Like, really? Just give that one to Sam. Just, come on, what are we doing here? It's tough.
Well, he was smashing the boards early, and he wasn't scoring, and he was hovering around the 3-point line. And I actually put a little bit of a rocket on our chats that we have in as part of our Patreon crew, and sort of said, "What's going on with Darry? Come on, you got to get in the low post, get some scoring going." And then he actually did that, and obviously ended up with the double because I think he had like 7 rebounds before he actually scored a point or something along those lines, right? He kind of started pretty well. Doyle was an interesting one because he sort of started slow but went bang.
Yep.
And Cotton kind of did the opposite. The first couple of minutes, Cotton was quite quiet. I was like, Sam have got him under control here because I'm a Sam member. And then all of a sudden, I think he hit 4 threes in a row in about a minute and a half. And you're just like, oh, what's he going to have? A 50, a 60-point Supercoach game? Just how big. But then he kind of got curtailed in the end, went a bit slowly at the end. So
yeah, it was not a great time when you're watching Bryce Cotton do that and going, when you're leading the train to like, no, Bryce Cotton, we don't need him to start off with. You're like, come on, man.
Yeah, it was a tough watch for non-Bryce Cotton owners on Friday night. Keanu Pinder, of course, got really involved. That front court for Illawarra is going to be a fascinating prospect throughout the course of the season. So you've got Froling there, who a lot of people loaded up on. You've got Darius Days, who comes in at 277 as one of the imports. And then you've got Lockie Olbrich, who was the most selected player in the competition coming into the season, who had 32 on a lot of people's benches. How do we assess that going forward in terms of who we're picking and how we think the points might shake out there?
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, Boydie, but I feel like it just means that the 3 of them, their floor is like not that low. I feel like they're all going to be getting rebounds. I feel like it's the sort of team where Coach Tatum will lean into those strengths, right? And just go, we've just got big dudes. This is great. They're all talented. They're all really good. And I think you look at the minute split, especially between Froling and Olbrich, right? Like they played, the full game essentially between the 2 of them, if not more. That's awesome. We'll keep leaning on that. I think it just keeps their floor pretty high. The ceiling might not be quite there on Froling.
each game.
And maybe on Olbrich each game. Days, I think, though, might be just like on a little bit of an island by himself, where his ceiling, as we saw this week, right? Like 43 is awesome. You expect more of that. Froling and Olbrich probably just evens out a little bit more. That's how I feel, Boydie.
The key thing with them, I think that they played, between the 3 of them, they played all the minutes at the 4 and 5, basically. So Heatling had 4 or 5 minutes, I think. That's about it. But the rest of the time, there was 2 of those 3 on at all times. So, and a bit of a mixture of all 3. So they're obviously comfortable playing the duos all over the shot. So, I think it's going to work well. I think Olbrich's a no-brainer. He's so cheap. He's not going to get 32 or whatever he scored every game, but I think he's going to score pretty well most games. Happy to roll with it.
He's going to be a nice little cash cow and a bit of an investment for a lot of people. Let's look at our not hot. So the top 5 scorers and the bottom 5 scorers in terms of maybe expectation and those who we thought might have had a little bit more on offer than they provided. So Isaac Humphries from Adelaide at 329,800 had 3 points. Jalen Galloway, of course, returning from the Milwaukee Bucks to the Sydney Kings, 233,700 had 3 as well and only had a couple of minutes in that game. Rocco Zakarski, one of the more favoured players in the competition in terms of the number of selections, about $95,000. He had 5 points on that Brisbane team that could not buy a rebound. Ian Clark, 234,800, the reigning 6th man of the year, had 7. And Chris Golding, 268,800, he had 8 points in the end. Let's start with Humphries, Boydie. It was an interesting sort of way that he was used. He didn't see a lot of the ball for that Adelaide team. Any sort of longer-term concerns there?
I think there is, because, we talked about it. His blitz points per minute, Supercoach-wise, was off the charts. I think he might have been the best points per minute player that played over 10 minutes a game, 15 minutes a game. So we were expecting big things from Humphreys, but then of course the signing of Montrezl Harrell came on the last couple of weeks.
What's the difference,
and,
Boydie?
and it seemed like
Montrez! Like, it's Trez. Like, it's all Trez. Like, this was he gets, like, the foul for, like, inciting the crowd. And Isaac Humphries like, I want to incite the crowd. So it's like, how about you get a rebound? What are we doing here? Like, that was the big difference.
I expected big things as soon as they were miking him up on his way onto the court. I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, I think he even said, he yelled out Showtime at one stage after scoring a point or something, whatever it was. I can't remember. But I think the key thing with him was, could he play the 4? It didn't look like he was playing the 4 at all. He was playing the 5, which is warning bells for Humphries because he only plays the 5 as well, pretty much. And they're kind of similar play. With J-Mart, Jarrell Martin, obviously, he's more of a 4 that can go out and shoot the 3 or do different things to Humphries. But it looks like Harrell's kind of a similar sort of player. So it's big warning signs for me. Obviously, he's 320, almost 330K Ice Humphries. So I'm not sure with those Adelaide doubles coming up round 3 and 4, you can even take a punt on him, to be honest.
Yeah, it feels like they were split a lot of the time, right?
Yep.
Like, especially early on as Trez comes into like actual game shape. Because the dude coming off an ACL, hasn't played in a million years.
Yep.
So I feel like Big Hump will be sort of like okay, but not at that price. And like that's the sort of big, sort of like tough, in the gut sort of shot, I think, in round 1.
He's the one to keep in the back of your mind, though, because if his price comes down, obviously mid-season, if Harrell's no longer on the team, there's obviously an injury replacement for Martin. If Martin comes back, Harrell gone, that might open up the door for Humphries later on when I think their back end of the schedule is pretty good for them with doubles, etc. So it's one to keep there.
And we saw what he did at the end of last season too, and what Adelaide did at the end of last season. Rocco Zukowski's an interesting one, just the 5 points, but his price point, you think that he's probably a hold for most coaches. Melbourne United, so the backcourt there of Clark and Golding. So Illy and Dellavedova had good nights. Clark and Golding with 15 points between them. Is there something we can read into this longer term, James?
Well, I think that's the thing that you're looking at with United, right, Bordy, where you go, they have this perimeter 4 in Clark, in Goulding, in Daly, in Shaylee, and you're like, I feel like each week, 2 of them will score really well. The other 2, not so much. This week it was Shay and Daly, my one true liege, King Daly, his time to shine as well. And you might see it, especially they've got Southeast Melbourne Phoenix this week. You've got the other game. Who do they play in the second one? It's Tassie. So that's a tough matchup as well. And you could definitely see like 2 different guys in each of those 2 games go completely spare. So it's hard to sort of like look at Illy and Daly and this week go, I have to trade him in because I can bank on that happening again. I just can't see it. Like, it's really tough. And like we mentioned Rocco, and you look at he and Tyrell Harrison both had really, really tough games in that one. Especially Tyrell, you're like, just get in closer. What are we doing? Get more rebounds. Here we go. And they both really struggled. I think Harrison finished on 13, which is one of the other sort of tough ones this week.
Yep.
And that set off massive alarm bells for me, like in terms of Rocco's role. Tyrell will probably be fine. I think he had a great blitz. I think Brisbane, just in general, I'm sort of still hands off on, right? Like, so that's where I land.
Well, their schedule's no good at Brisbane. I think Rocco's maybe a bit of a hold, though. I think he came out, his first offensive play, he scored, but it was an offensive foul. So that was a turnover. Instead of being 2 points, it was -2 points, right? I think his next play that he got the ball in on offense, he scored, but someone else set a bad screen, or it was an offensive foul off the ball. So there was a bit of a bad luck there, right? Where he's probably missing, and with his price point at 95, almost 96,000, you don't need a lot of points to see a bit of a price appreciation there. So I'm not really that worried. If you've got Rocco, unless you want to, if you've got a luxury trade there and you want to swap him to someone else to have a better structure over the next few weeks, by all means do it. If you're stuck with him, don't panic and don't do a trade on him that you shouldn't be doing when you can use it somewhere else.
They'll be an interesting watch, Brisbane, because Josh Bannon potentially comes back this week. He does space the floor, maybe give Rocco a little bit more space, but just how those the front courts shake out for Brisbane will be really interesting to see. Let's take a look at who's moving around the competition. So the most traded in, the most traded out players coming into round 2. No surprise to see Jalen Adams atop this list. So 14% of teams moving on him. 448,000, in fact, Jalen Adams $392,000. So we spoke about that earlier. He's not really super premium price, but as a former MVP, we know that he's got the scoring potential. Darius Days, 10.5% of teams moving on him at 277. Lat Mayen, good story out of the Adelaide 36ers, had a really good game on Sunday, 133. Rob Lowe, 5.5% of trades in, 173.6, and Alex Tui at 5.2 at 191.9. What jumps out the page to you there, Boydie?
Well, the Adams one, obviously, after the top score is the big one that, everyone was probably going to do that and jump on the bandwagon. The key thing with Adams as well is his break-even's down to about 46, something along those lines, on a double. So he can average 23 over his 2 games and still see some price appreciation. So that would come in handy, I think. I don't think any of them, maybe Mayen's the surprise there, but obviously he's probably knuckled down that 4 spot with Harrell and Humphries playing only the 5, really. And he performed. So 133K, if you want to slide him into your bench, obviously he's probably going to play. He's got doubles on round 3 and 4. So that was a bit of a surprise pick probably for me after he had a -10, I know, in one of their Blitz games. But we might write that one off. I think that was versus that Sem Phoenix game where they basically played their bench players, Adelaide. So
Yeah, Lat feels like the roll of the dice guy here out of that top 5 where you're like, well, 133, awesome price.
Yep.
We'll see what happens. And like, you just don't know. Like, I think I started Kendrick Davis as well. We'll get to that in a second. But like, you sort of look at those roles between those guys and you're like, all right, well, is this another case where one of them just has like that super scoring night? Off they go, fill in the stats around it. Their Supercoach price goes absolutely ballistic. Or we're going to see more Trez absolutely dominate and like maybe Kendrick Davis like comes along and Lat falls off again. But at 133, you can't really go too wrong. Alex Tui is like the obvious one here as well, right? Like what an absolute jet, 191,000. His role with that Sydney Kings team as well was probably the biggest surprise, I think, out of round 1 for that team. Where you look at him and he just played. He just kept playing and you're like, he's still out there.
Yep.
This is great.
26 minutes, I think he had for his 34 Supercoach points. So points per minute, really good. He looks like he's bulked up even more. I thought he looked even bigger than he looked at the Blitz. He's probably a little bit maybe on the skinnier side last year. So, I think he's got the body now for it to go and play those 26 minutes every night.
This is also gorge. Like, Tui was, along with like Rocco and co, like part of the Boomers sort of training squad, stuff like that. So
Henshaw as well.
Tui was there, same with Ben. Yeah. So they're like, there with Gorge the entire time, and just like Gorge is eyeballing him going, Supercoach, jet, let's go, come on. Don't worry about the Olympics, next time round. But Supercoach, like, that Gorge has got Tui in his team.
Do we have to check on that?
I think we'll ask him. Yeah.
Possibly.
That's your job there, John.
All right, possibly captain, I reckon, Brian Goorjian for Alex Tui. So traded out, Bryce Cotton tops this list, Kendrick Davis, who you referenced there, Ethan Almansa from Perth, the next star at 115. Cam Oliver, interestingly, has been traded out 0.8% of those trades, and Deng Adel. So the numbers on the trade outs aren't as high as the numbers on the trade ins. Obviously, that's the general way that we see that. But the Bryce Cotton one is interesting, that he's delivered a 42 and then they go into a single header. Is that just a value proposition with people trying to get in some of these potential sort of cash cow type players?
I think so. I think with Bryce's price, what is he, 448?
Yep.
You can basically take him and maybe like $100 grand-ish sort of player and almost get 2 of the newer import sort of players price points. So I think that it all just comes down to structure for that. I think a lot of people took a punt on, it was a free hit really with Bryce round 1 playing Sem Phoenix, whose defense is questionable at the start of the season, it looks like. So everyone went with it and, it worked. He was the 4th highest points player. So, and now that's just a sign of that. I wouldn't read in too much to it. Obviously round 3, they're on a double again. So, he's probably going to be on that trade-in list next week again. So
I like that you brought up the Oliver point as well as actually Davis. Like Davis had a solid start and that was fine, but you could also see that he's probably the most disposable of those guys, but at the same time, next week he'll be the most traded in.
I'd almost argue that's probably not. I wouldn't see that at all. I think he showed everything. I mean, he had a bit of a slow start, but the key thing with Davis is he's got the ball in his hands. So he's going to be putting up points, and he did it in a hurry, basically in the second half. So
out of all the people who actually went off this week, he was like the one we were like, oh man, he's at this price point, and people have probably jumped off. Don't jump off.
No,
he's going to be awesome. He's got like the Adelaide. Doubles come
round 3 and 4,
weeks after, so he'll be rolling. And Cam Oliver is an interesting one where he was really, really good, but I think a lot of this comes down to he was smashing in threes.
Yep.
And you're like, that's cool. Is he going to do it again?
Yeah, that's
Let's find out. Whereas like, you feel like one of the things that I will hit on later is like a Cam Oliver trade where you might just go, we'll just go to Cooks. Here we go. go to the teammate off. It feels like the floor is a little bit higher, I think, for Cooks. But Cam Oliver, you can see why people might just go, that was neat. Don't know if it's sustainable, right? So especially in that role.
I've got that question myself. I've got Oliver or I had him in the starting lineup, but I've also got Hurt and I've got Days, and all those guys are on a double this week, and I've got Jack White, right? So I'm blessed with the choice of having to get rid of maybe one of those guys to try and set my team up for round 3 now. And I think Oliver might be the odd man out because, he kind of floated around that 3-point line a bit too much for my liking because, obviously we've talked about it. Cooks needs to be in the key on that offensive a lot of the time. So I think Oliver might be my out as well. I might be adding that to one of those lists.
We'll come back to some of our trades a little bit
we'll do
later
that.
on in the program. So our shout-outs, so the top scoring teams across the course of the week. The Wundana Wildcats for Nate had 285 points.
Huge.
So total value of 1,991,900.
Started Harrell
Yep.
and started Lockie Olbrich, I think, as well. So really, really, really good decisions in the end, but took some big risks and it paid off.
Yeah,
That's an awesome, talk about
I
rolls
love
of the
it.
dice. It's like, let's just go.
It's round one.
It's
It's
round
chips
one.
in.
It's free hit, off you go. Great job by Nate. That's amazing.
Yep.
285 is absurd for round
Huge.
1. Absolutely crushed it. Had the captain on Adams as well. Just
Yep.
nailed every decision.
Yeah.
Exact opposite to me. So, there you go.
Absolutely chips in from Nate. So time to Kel for Bradley, 281. I will win Liam, 278, and a couple of teams at 277. So good luck to you if you're in that basket. Let's take a look at our own teams in what you got. So what we're looking at for this week, what we're coming off last week and moving to this week. James, what you got?
I've not got much. I'll tell you that much, Joel. No, a lot of mine, it'll be simply, at the moment, I'm still banking on Derek Walton Jr. with his double this week. Kendrick Davis still in the other guard spot. The big question for me will be Oliver in one of my forward spots. People have been obviously off Jack White. I think that's a mistake. I think we saw this week the guards just against Tassie. It was just tough, right? It was always going to be tough. Whereas your backcourt against Tassie, I think, can score pretty handily. We saw that happen. I think the front court's always going to struggle. There's a lot of length, a lot of size. They're really well coached. I think Jack White sticks fat with me this week. The Olbrich Froling combo for me, I might just go, right, caution in the wind, Froling might be out for me. But with that 220, the thing for me that sticks out the most, so with that Walton, Davis, Oliver, Jack White, Froling starting 5, Davis is the one with the cool ceiling.
Yep.
He's the cool one. This is going to be so cool to see what happens. Because he couldn't hit a shot. What are we doing? He couldn't hit a shot. I'm watching this guy going, Adelaide, you're breaking my heart. He's the only one not scoring that much, but he did kind of everything else. 4 turnovers sort of hurt, but he still ended up with 29 points. You're like, that's okay. 29's in your round 1 debut in the NBL. Fingers crossed, that hits again. Next week, he hits a couple more shots. He actually nailed a couple of threes. It was kind of everything else. And talk about bad luck. Just shots rolling in and out. You're like, how does that not go down? What are we doing? So he might be the one who I stick with from Adelaide this week. Froling is the big question for me at 350,000. What do I do? The bench, Glover. Thank you, Angus. Flying that ginger flag high. Appreciate that. But I don't know, Bordy, were you concerned about the amount of minutes that he played, which is a lot? His scoring was quite down. That was kind of the thing that stuck to me. Will Hickey, solid. Henschel, obviously fine. Olbrich, fine. And Rocco. So I think Rocco might be a decision to make for a trade out. Jack White stays. It's just a tricky, tricky week. Glover might be the one the sacrificial lamb.
Someone's got to go, obviously, all the time, or 2 have got to go if you're going to do 2 trades as well. I'm not so worried about Glover. The 22 minutes is actually, I think it's a good thing. I just think he didn't have a good night. Hickey's maybe a bit more of a question mark for me because I think he came on late. He only scored, I think, 4 points in the last minute of the game when it was a bit of junk time. So his score possibly could have been lower, which is a little bit of a red flag. So if I had to choose out of those 2, I'd probably be going Hickey out first over Glover. My other decisions, as I said, I've got 4 of the sort of bigger, the big guys in White, Oliver, Days, and Hurt. It was Hurt just a one-week pony, I guess, with his 38. Obviously, he's got a lower break-even than Oliver. So am I going to play the break-even game and try and get a bit more value appreciation and keep Hurt and trade out Oliver or even White because White's break-even's a bit high compared to his score of 19. But I think White turns it around as well, especially against the Sem this week.
Yeah, of course, he's got that on Thursday to kick things off. In terms of my own team, look, I think the White piece is an interesting one. So starting him with Olbrich and Henschel on the bench, who they're my boys. I'm going to ride with those two.
Yep.
So the Jack White one is one that I'm looking at. The Windler piece, of course, is probably the other one that, that Perth with a single. I'll probably try and make some kind of move there. And then, I've got Hickey on the bench. Zakarski. Jonah Antonio was a pleasant surprise. We talked about him last week. Yeah, had him on the bench.
Good.
So just in terms of, knowing that there were going to be minutes there for a guard on that Cairns team, and he played pretty well. So he's one that I'm pretty happy to stick with for now. So, there's so many possibilities for all of us, I think.
And the ins, obviously, we haven't really talked about. We talked about most of our outs. I think Tui's the no-brainer. 34 Supercoach points in the 26 minutes, as we spoke about. He's 191K. I think he's a no-brainer. He's my definite trade-in. The other one, I'm kind of questioning whether I go one of those premium guys, try and slide a few things around and bring in DeWalt this week, or bring in Adams even, or just go out and out for some value appreciation and bring, say, Rob Lowe in, who's got a nice low BE after this week. He's got 2 doubles in a row. Does that just make sense?
He has to have a low BE, doesn't he? Rob Lowe. He can't have anything but a low BE. What about your maker moves? Where are you looking, James?
I'm not going to get low. I'm going to look. I think the Tui thing is like the no-brainer. I think I'm going to be trying absolutely everything I can. Like moving on from Hickey is sort of up there. It'll be like probably Hickey, Glover, maybe Froling that sort of get it in the neck. But the switch for me will be just making sure that I get Tui in and just sort of rolling from there and just hoping for the best, I think. And like, if there is a downgrade for me from like using Froling to go back down to someone, but we'll get to this in the captaincy sort of point. Like, I actually still don't mind Froling this week because he's got the double. He's playing Brisbane. We just saw Menenga absolutely tear up Brisbane like out of nowhere. You're like, well, that was pretty handy. Like, he didn't end up with a massive Supercoach score, but watching that game, you're like, oh, they're doing whatever they want. Like, it was a really good coaching experience, I think, watching like just Brisbane get tanned. But outside of that, I mean, it's the Froling because Illawarra had the double. I'll probably stay with him this week. I'll get Tui in because he's got the double as well. And just sort of, around the margins for the moment. Because the Cam Oliver to Cooks one, I just don't know if I've got the gumption to stick with that one. So we'll see.
Very quickly before we go, captains?
It's either DeWalt or Froling, I think, for me.
I might have to just back it up again and go days, double days.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'm with Damon Lowry. Darius Paydays is going to be my captain, making that sweet Supercoach cash. Gents, great fun. Good to chat. Good luck for round 2.
Thank you.
Thanks, JP. I think the key thing there, though, is like just you got to keep an eye on your doubles this week. What have we got? 4 teams on the doubles. We've got Southeast Melbourne Magic Phoenix, the United, the Hawks, and the Kings. So your captain will be one of those guys, and away we go. But I'm nervous. We go back-to-back horrible weeks. I'm staring down the barrel, JP.
Don't forget about round 3, though. Only Melbourne United on the double round 3 out of those 4 teams. So
and whatever you do not trade anyone in from New Zealand. We'll talk about that maybe next week as well. Thanks, gents. Thanks for your company as well. Supercoach.nbl.com.au, the NBL app, the Supercoach app, the place to go to get all your information ahead of round 2. Good luck. We'll see you back here next week.